Hi, so my thoughts on the Russia-Ukraine war. Let's look. The New York Times is saying, they're worried that, Russia's winning. John Mearsheimer is getting many interviews where he's saying that Russia's going to win. It's hopeless for Ukraine. They should just quit now. And here's the Ukraine map, which I'm going to explain in a second. But before I get into the recent map, I want to tell you about a story, one of the most famous novellas or short stories written. Well, in my mind, one of my favorites. It's called Bartleby the Scrivener by Herman Melville. It was written in 1853. And in Bartleby the Scrivener, Bartleby is a scrivener in one of these business commercial enterprises in America, and he copies documents essentially. And one day the boss goes to him and says, listen, I'd like you to copy document X, put that aside, do this. And Bartleby says, I'd prefer not to. So the boss like, I don't want to get into it with him. He's having a bad day. I'll come back, whatever. So the next day, the boss asks him something different. And once again, Bartleby says, I prefer not to. And the book is how the boss is like, he doesn't say it in a way that's sort of confrontational that I can fire him. So it's just weird. I can't do anything because he doesn't really say it in a way that he's angry or whatever. He just prefer not to. And that's sort of the story. So it goes on and on. Like Bartleby, every time he's asked to do something, says that I prefer not to, and nobody knows how to deal with it. So eventually they move the whole office, and then I don't have phones back then, but they get contacted by the next tenant who's like, there's this guy sitting here and he won't leave. He's not getting paid anymore, nothing. And we say, can you please leave? And he says, I prefer not to. It's such a deep story about human nature that and it's covered by the way, Dostoevsky in Notes from Underground, right? Notes from Underground, there's this guy, an officer, and he comes to get paid, and the main character in the book, just holds up his money, says, oh, I can't find your money anywhere, right? And the guy rattles his saber and everything. There's a certain type of will. And again, I'm not making up anything new. But that's what Mearsheimer, Scott Ritter, all these people that are saying that Russia is going to win, this is the variable they just don't get. And I'm going to explain why they don't get it, why I don't believe that Russia is going to win Ukraine ultimately, ever. And why what's going on right now is just more bullying by Russia. They've been trying to bully them for 3 years. And you can get depressed, and there are depressing aspects of it, obviously. I mean, it's not like the problems that they're talking about in recruitments and gaining territory aren't real problems. But really, if you just sort of step back, I think if Zelensky tomorrow said, okay, we're going to negotiate with Russia, we're going to end the war, whatever, we'll give them Donbass, Crimea, whatever, I believe 100,000 Ukrainian soldiers on the front lines, when they said, hey, you got to come back, would say, oh, we prefer not to. Zelensky would be like, you got to come back. We'd prefer not to. There's this sort of Ukrainian resolve, an American resolve, like me and many others, all around the world. There are people that are with the Ukrainians in that spirit of Professor Mearsheimer, in all due respect, we prefer not to. So anyway, I'm going to explain why I feel that his and Scott Ritter's and these various other pundits saying that it all is over, why that is exaggerated in my opinion. All right, so let's let's go to the map. So Russia, yes, if you look at these yellow lines, Russia is making a lot of headway, but these are gray zones. Here's Krelinka, I think it is. So here's this buffer zone right here, right? So there's a buffer zone all across I'm not going to go down. And Russia is basically making some headway here. But the buffer zone is sort of a weird thing, right? So you have basically both lines. So let's you have the Russian line, and let's say you have the Ukrainian line. And this is the buffer zone right here. So the buffer zone offers each side a very simple calculus. If you send men in, they will get killed, but you'll get territory. So it's only a question of if you want X territory, you send in Y men, right? So if you want 100 meters. You send in 100 men who are going to die to get it, but you get the 100 meters. But it doesn't mean that you can actually get through this defensive line. So you can occupy it, but only at a cost of men. And so, yes, Russia is expending a lot of men to get into the gray zones, but the gray zones don't really affect where Ukraine's true defenses lie. Now, you might say, well, if it's closer, it's going to be harder to get through those defenses. But that hasn't been borne out. I just don't see that. So, yeah, it's, Ukraine would rather Russia not be in those gray zones, but it's not in itself critical. So, like, here's another gray zone right here where Russia looks like it's gotten quite a bit. But look, there's nothing here. I mean, the river is a natural defense. So Ukraine's defense, which is probably right here, and there's probably another one right here, it just doesn't, you have to go through a lot of open territory to get here and then cross the river. It just doesn't make a difference. Again, it's not nice, but it's not a huge deal. So Mearsheimer and all these people saying, oh, well, look, they're making headway on the front all across the line, and Ukraine really just can't withstand it. No, I just don't see it yet. They may be right, but I'd have to see some true way beyond this gray zone effort. So now let's go to Kharkiv. So the Russians have taken this territory, which looks significant. Let's just zoom in on that a bit. So they've taken this territory, was it like 10 or towns, and they're trying to get close to Kharkiv, to these other cities. But I need to explain something that's completely different than the other one. First of all, Bakhmut was 71,000 people, and Kharkiv is, or before the war at least, like about 1.5 million. So it took them 2 years to get into a town of 71,000, which basically they only got there by literally leveling the whole city. So to get here, when you move in onto a city like this, and this is what happened in Kiev early in the war, when you move into the city like this, so as you move here, you lose like this amount of your troops. So let's just say that Russia lost, 1,000, or it's probably more. Let's say 1,000 whatever troops over a week, right? So you lose 1,000 over a week. Now, the further they go in here, this goes exponentially. It goes from 1,000 to 10,000 to, if they want to get here, it's going to be 100,000 that they're going to lose. It's not like the other parts of Ukraine, right? I told you about the gray zones where you're basically fighting these sort of like static forces. And basically how each kilometer is it's going to be more of a linear function, right? Each kilometer will be, let's say, 1,000 men or whatever, that you can go forever into these flatlands. When you get close to a city, it's an exponential loss of life. And remember, even in Kharkiv, let's just say, whatever, they're probably at least, and this is so conservative, there are at least, I would assume, 100,000 men in Kharkiv that will go fight the Russians if they have to. So the Russians really need at least 300,000, right? A 3-to-1 to start getting very close to Kharkiv. That's what they would have to lose. So for Mearsheimer to say, oh, well, they're going to win the war, look at this, look at all this stuff, it's not really, I don't see any benefit. I see, bullying, this is scary. But really, I mean, I just, he's the military guy, right? I mean, he's the guy that says, oh, you have to have artillery and this and that. It's like the simple numbers just don't add up. I mean, okay, Russia is threatening some of the gray zones in the border. But until Russia gets meaningfully close to Kharkiv, it's just they're just wasting men. I just don't see it. I don't see it. So. I mean, things look bleak lately, but I don't see any change. I'm just going to very quickly say why, in the long run, Russia can't win this war, because all wars throughout history, many of them are fought between the resource supplier and the manufacturer or the distributor. And in history, it isn't the ones that are fishing for cod or the ones that are farming that come out on top. It's the ones that take those materials and build warships, transportation, financial systems. They're the ones that win. So Russia is just a resource supplier. It can't win on its own. So ultimately, the West will just wear them down through the production of advanced weapons. And this is another thing that Mearsheimer doesn't talk about. So one of the reasons that Russia is not doing well, but you're seeing this, is that they're getting weapons from China, which isn't really in the news properly. So yes, China's giving them all their weapons and they're using it to fight Ukraine, but they're expendable weapons. They're rockets, they're drones, right? You fire them, they're gone. But a military, the power of a country's military is based on equipment that is very difficult to build and very difficult to replace, like fighter jets, tanks, artillery, all this this hardware. But let's just even talk about the Air Force, right? All this stuff, again, you can't just go buy it from China. China can sell you a cheap drone, can sell you a cheap guidance kit, and drop your old bomb from a warehouse on a city. Yes, but it can't, once you lose a plane. So Russia's been losing its warships and its AWACS and bombers and fighters. All these things are not being replaced. They are gone forever, in my opinion, because Russia doesn't have the money or the capacity to rebuild them. So we want to, they don't, I think, properly separate what Russia is expending using its oil money to buy these expendable weapons from China, let's just say, and their actual military power that's being degraded every day by all these Ukrainian attacks. So or Western attacks, I should say. So, over time, Russia will be debilitated. It's not about West versus East as much. It's really about the manufacturers. And at the end of the day, China is a manufacturer. At the end of the day, they're going to side with the West. And they're going to, they're playing along now because they're getting cheap oil. But when push comes to shove, they will sell Russia down the river because they're a manufacturer. That's how they make their money. They want the oil from Russia, but they don't want Russia to basically get more powerful than them. Nobody is going to accept Russia getting more powerful from this war. Not China, not the West. So again, I just want to make that clear. The manufacturers are going to win here ultimately. They always do. Always. And this is another thing that Mearsheimer's history that he seems to, he doesn't really address. So to summarize my points, even if Ukraine can't get any more recruits, the 100,000 or whatever they have there, they're never going to give up. They'd prefer not to. And you can talk about how you've lost the war. You can give them any sort of geopolitical lecture you want, but they don't care. It's like Hamas and Israel, right? Israel, all these Israelis are go do hours of videos and millions of pages of explaining the historical context, and the Palestinians and the Arabs in the general Middle East are like, we don't care, get out. Okay, so and Ukrainians are the same way. It's like, we don't care, get out. And there are many other states within the old Soviet Union that are just itching to say that too. So anyway, long term, yes, I don't see Russia winning. And this is scary, this is upsetting, but it goes up and down and up and down. And you'll see something's going to happen in the next few months, some huge victory from Ukraine, and then it'll go the other way. And then it'll go the other way again. But ultimately, in the end, yeah. Anyway, that's my take. Thanks for watching.